Hello and welcome to the next in our series looking at 20th century philosophers and what they might have to say to us today. We're looking this week at the philosopher Pierre Bourdieu, and yesterday I talked about the idea of habitus, in other words, the location where you live and how it shapes you. What Pierre Bourdieu is really most famous for is his idea of capital. He's a social philosopher, so a sociologist who thinks philosophically about the world in which we live. And he argues that we have four types of capital. We have economic capital, which we all understand. We have cultural capital, social capital, and symbolic capital. Building on his idea of capital, feminist philosophers have gone on to argue that we also have emotional types of capital, which I'll talk about. And then people like myself have argued that we also have spiritual capital. Today, I want to look at economic and cultural capital. Now, the underlying theory of Bourdieu is that we have these different types of capital and we exchange them. The most classic example is economic capital and cultural capital. So economic capital is the money that you have in the bank. Simple and easy. Cultural capital is the knowledge that you have. Now, this can be book learning knowledge. It can also be knowledge of your environment, your habitus. So, for example, somebody who has street smarts and knows how to make a living in Soweto through his or her street smarts has a high degree of cultural capital in that particular area. Cultural capital also extends to things like knowing how to dress appropriately for an event or what knife and fork to use in a fancy restaurant. So it's understanding how to be in a social situation, having knowledge of that. The most classic example is that we take economic capital and we buy cultural capital. That means we pay for an education. We then use the degree or the diploma or whatever it is that we have paid for and received to then get a job. In other words, get more economic capital. So we are constantly trading these capitals in order to survive or to make our way in the world. And so Bourdieu is arguing that if you have money, just reinvesting that money is not going to make you get further in life. Very often you have to take economic capital and use it to gain something like social capital. And often we use our cultural capital, our knowledge of how things work, both in a formal sense and in the informal sense of the cultural capital that we have gained. These are the things that we then pass on. These are the types of capital that we use to progress in life and hopefully to make more money, if that is what you're looking for. For many people, particularly at the university, making lots of money is not particularly important. They want to develop their knowledge. In other words, they want to develop their cultural capital more and more. Now, what does this have to say for us today? Well, I think one of the important things that the pandemic is showing us is that money alone is not going to get you through this pandemic. What you need is an ability to understand the world that you're in. You need to have knowledge about how pandemics work, knowledge about the virus, knowledge about the vaccines, and the rest of your kind of cultural capital of how to cope in a difficult situation. And so the invitation today for you is, if you still have family members that lived through apartheid, spend some time with them and listen to their cultural capital, their knowledge of how to get through a difficult situation. What did they learn and what can they share with you? This pandemic is very different to surviving under apartheid, but there are lessons we can learn from our elders. If you lived through apartheid, share those stories with your children. Now is a time for us to develop our cultural capital and to share our cultural capital, our knowledge. And most of us in the library are somewhat more mature, and we have experience of difficulties. Let's today share our cultural capital of struggle, of difficulty with those around us, particularly with our children. And let's listen to our elders and what they can share with us, the knowledge that they can pass on. And use this difficult time as a time of sharing, of hearing each other and sharing our stories. So I hope that as you share these stories, you understand that they are not just stories. They are our individual forms of capital, and that cultural capital knowledge is as important as economic capital. I hope you stay well and stay safe.